Oh my god, really? Oh my gosh.
You look the same.
You look old.
Shit.
Ooh, don't do it. Please don't do it.
I choose to live.
And you'll die.
You're listening to Duck Dust FM. You ever had that helplessly disenchanting feeling of wanting something so bad, and when you finally receive it, it's not at all what you expected, and you wind up massively disappointed? Or to be more relevant, waited years for something and are finally delivered a close approximation of your expectations, but it's meaningless because in the interim few years, you were subjected to a long, systematic, and painful destruction of the thing you love and everything that made it special in the first place. Where now, when you get what you want, you're upset not because you didn't get what you wanted, but because you weren't able to enjoy it.
Perhaps.
You got what you wanted, why are you complaining? Kenobi was a masterpiece. Allow me to try to explain as I dive into Ahsoka's cinematic pentasode. The episode starts with Hera and her son, comprised of 6% of her DNA, arriving at the star map place from the last episode, where Ahsoka is missing and Huang is complaining that Ahsoka and Sabine never stick together. But all of a sudden, Jason Syndulla uses his Jedi powers to listen into the world between plot points, prompting Hera to tell Asian Santa and his men to fly around the water until they stumble into Ahsoka. Then the real episode begins with Ahsoka talking to Hayden Christensen Anakin, and his point is basically that she got defeated by Ray Stevenson because she's still guilty after all these years about how they fell out back in Clone Wars Season 6. And they begin to have a slow and pathetically choreographed lightsaber duel. Then we're thrust into the best part of the series so far, and we're finally given, after all these years of begging and waiting, some brief live-action Clone Wars flashbacks with young Ahsoka and Anakin dressed in that gorgeous Clone Wars-era armor. They're in battle on planet ILM stagecraft setting 00648, with the fog turned up to 11 at some point early in the Clone Wars, judging on the Phase 1 clone armor. Ahsoka's like, "Hey, this is the Clone Wars!"
We gotta get Joe back.
Anakin is teaching a doubtful young Ahsoka that despite Jedis being keeper of the peace, they must learn to fight in order to survive, and tells Ahsoka that choosing not to fight earns you a free admission into the Luke Skywalker School of Pacifism.
I'll never turn to the dark side. So be it.
Next we return to Hera and Huang, who say a lot and nothing at the same time, before we get amongst this Dave Filoni wet dream, every Clone Wars fan's wet dream, in an ever so brief live-action Siege of Mandalore flashback that had just about everything going for it besides the massive shroud of vape smoke and token chat GPT line from Rex. Though it was very cool to see him. They talk about the battle before Ahsoka is just like, "Oh wait, you're still Darth Vader," to which Anakin draws his lightsaber, now red like that awesome Vortin Kandera fan edit of the duel on Mustafar, and complete with Sith eyes, and they have a brief lightsaber duel before returning to the world between expectations and continuing. Ahsoka does some Super Smash Bros. Dodges and ends up with Anakin's lightsaber somehow, and instead of defeating her former master, she says she chooses to live.
Missed it by that much.
God damn it. Anyway, the episode's over, despite it going on for another 25 minutes, with Mon Mothma threatening to strip Hera of her rank and possibly her clothes, because she can't provide evidence that the prisoner that was just broken out of New Republic custody, who is associated with Thrawn, has any connection to Thrawn. A drawn-out pissing match between Asian Santa and a strong rebel fleet commander, and an interdimensional Free Willy 2, where Ahsoka Jack Sparrows herself by going into the Space Whale Galaxy. Kinda hard to believe on a baseline level that people paid good money to sit in a theater for 50 minutes, and 10 good ones for this episode. Don't get me wrong, it's the best one of the series so far by a wide margin, has many good things going for it, including, "So you do like it?" Yes, I imagine I would have liked it much more than a reasonable amount had it still been early 2021, but that's not the case. Obviously similar to how our interest of the original trilogy, and maybe even the prequels at that time, was so denigrated by the sequels, that by the time Mando Season 1 and 2 came around, our interest was restored, but not back to the same level because of the damage the sequels did to the Star Wars canon. We are now at the point where the original trilogy has become the first 2 seasons of Mando, and this episode has taken its place, with the dog shit in between being the Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi, and so on.
Could you say that again?
My point is that history is repeating itself, albeit in a different way, where the damage done by the sequel trilogy is compounded with the damage done by the atrocious D+ shows, resulting in an apathy seismic charge nowhere near big enough to counteract the 10 minutes of good content. Whereas before we had 2 full seasons of mostly good episodes to make us forget Kennedy's cinematic war crimes. 7 out of 10. But even in the best part of the series, there's still things to call out, such as Ahsoka's actress being a bit younger than imagined, and not finding another similar actor for when she's 17 at the end of the show, some CGI issues, not including the space whales, and good old Disney dialogue. But I suppose we'll continue to live by the Disney Star Wars mantra and take what we can get, even if everything around it sucks. But really the worst thing of all, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, is that when I finally got what I wanted after all this time, I felt nothing more than that's cool. And that's not because of my cold black heart, because I can still watch Empire Strikes Back and have it hit me despite knowing everything that happens. It's because if you're subjected to so much shit over time, eventually when something good comes along, it can't stand out as much, because you know somewhere in your mind that if everything before it was shit, there's a good chance everything after it is going to be too. Too pessimistic?
Perhaps.
But this is what happens when there's a continual stream of abysmal content. It's hard to get hooked on something once, harder to come back when you've been pushed away, near impossible to return again after being pushed away for a second time. What can they really expect at this point but to have fans move on? So unlike the Mando Season 2 finale, it comes at no cost because there's nothing to sacrifice this time. There will be no world between worlds purgatory to take refuge in anymore while the franchise is being fixed, because Star Wars, like what previously happened to people who were impaled by a lightsaber, is dead, with only a force ghost of their former fanbase left to tell themselves, I told you so. Fucking like and subscribe for duck's sake.
The Duke.